Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now go to the last part of this first session, which is a panel discussion. And the theme for the panel discussion is Navigating the Healthcare Crisis Amidst War, Climate Change, and Regulatory Hurdles. I would now request Dr. Satya Brahma to please come forward and take over for this session as the moderator.
Today we are having with us Padma Shri Dr. Mukesh Batra. Thank you very much for coming over here. Let's give him a huge round of applause over him. So we are going to have a panel discussion, which is going to be an interesting one. I would like to call upon Professor Dr. V. Mohan here. You are the guiding spirit, so I think you will lead us here. Mr. Sushant Raorane, co-founder and director, Adroit Biomed Limited. And Professor Dr. Suneel Deshpande, please come here for a panel discussion. The program head of Pharmaceutical Management of IES Mumbai. And Dr. Sreenath, the Chief Operating Officer of Nakoda Chemicals, to be with us. And he has come all the way from Hyderabad. Please come on, sir, here then. So this is going to be a televised panel discussion, so I would like all of you to switch off your mobile phones. So we are going to discuss about healthcare crisis in times of war. We have been witnessing wars across the globe. You have seen the fall of Bangladesh government. You have seen Taliban taking over Afghanistan. And you have seen human rights violations and healthcare denial at Lebanon, also at Gaza. The topic I chose for this panel discussion is how do we ensure that healthcare delivery and access during the war time? And what are the regulatory hurdles for this actually? What happens when the president of Israel denies that United Nations president to come to give healthcare delivery to those people who are suffering from war? I would like to start with Professor Dr. V. Mohan. Dr. V. Mohan is an authority in diabetes. I've already explained he's the father of Indian diabetes, and I think he will shed some light. I'll start with him first and then go to the next round. How do we ensure healthcare access and delivery in times of war, especially when we see that the people are dying, there are no medical facilities, United Nations goes out to help, but it doesn't happen. What best we could do to increase the level of diplomacy so that it goes out to them actually?
I think it's not an easy thing to answer. During war, it's very difficult to do this. Let me talk about my specialty, and you said people dying. And the simplest example that you can give in my specialty is type 1 diabetes. So, type 1 diabetes, if children or adults with type 1 diabetes don't get insulin, they will die. As simple as that. 100 years ago, 103 years ago, we didn't have insulin. And all children died within 2 weeks to 1 year. Was the kind of 1 year was the kind of maximum survival of any child with type 1 diabetes. Today we have got 70-year, 80-year survival thanks to insulin. If insulin just enters into the body, the child will be alive. Insulin you stop, the child will die. Whatever else treatment you give in the world. So at the time of crisis like this, and it need not be just war, it can be tsunami, it can be earthquakes, it can be anything else. If the supply is cut off, then children will die. And I'll just give you an example. Dr. J.P. Bose, who was a diabetologist before my father's time, although my father is called as the father of diabetology in India, there was a man from Calcutta, Dr. J.P. Bose, who was actually running a diabetic clinic in Calcutta in 1923 onwards. And during the World War time, he wrote to the Surgeon General of India, British man, and told him, sir, if a single child dies in this country due to lack of insulin, because insulin, there's no insulin made in India, it had to come from UK,
Sure.
and the war was there, world war is going on. If the ships don't come, and if the insulin doesn't come, children will die. So he said, I will hold you responsible. For any child who dies in this country, I will hold you responsible if insulin does not come to India. And the Surgeon General wrote back to him and said, I will ensure that not a single child dies in this country, and I will ensure that essential supplies go on. So in any war situation, if we are human beings and not animals, I think we should see that the basic rights of a human being to be alive. Can you say that during war you will starve everyone and kill everyone? Or you will not give food or water to people? So when you have essential medicines like oxygen or insulin to be given, which is life-saving, if you don't give that, it's nothing short of murder. You're completely murdering. There's nothing different from cutting off insulin to a type 1 diabetic child and taking a knife and stabbing the child. It's almost the same. Probably the knife is easier. At least child will die immediately. The other is going to be a more painful death. So in any war situation, it has been ensured that, you have the peace people holding the white flag and so on. These are the people who have to ensure that basic democratic rights like giving food to people or water to people or insulin to people has to be ensured. And insulin, just one example. There could be other, if an asthmatic doesn't get oxygen, then what happens? They'll also die. So COPD. So these things have to be ensured, and more international policies, United Nations and all other agencies, WHO, are ensuring war may be there, but people should not suffer from these basic needs of the war. So that is a human right, and that is something which has to be established. If you go beyond that, then you are just an animal and you are just a savage. You are not a human being anymore. No president of any country can say, I will kill everyone and think. Then you are not a human being at all. You shouldn't be living in this world at all. That is my opinion, and I think that's the international opinion of all people.
Right. So let's come from an academic perspective to Professor Dr. Suneel Deshpande. I don't think there is a syllabus in your pharmaceutical management which talks about healthcare access and delivery in times of war. Are there any subjects in the curriculum which you tutor?
No, we always advocate, these areas because they are very essential, for healthcare.
Do you suggest the government of different nations to have this particular subject since the escalating tensions going on in the third world countries and everywhere actually?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very essential because when this topic was brought forward, I did some research on this.
Okay.
And I would just like to share two thoughts on this. After the World War II, they also tried to identify what would be the impacts, of the World War II. And what they found out, there are research papers on this particular topic, that during the first 5 years of life, if the child has been exposed to a war, then it results into adverse effects on health in the adulthood. And the areas where these adverse effects vary, it could even be cancer, it could be metabolic diseases, it could be angina, it could be cardiovascular diseases and obesity. So they found out a correlation between the exposure to the war in the first 5 years and then the manifestation of the varied diseases and disorders later in the adulthood. And number two, I found a very interesting research paper, especially on what you said, which is called as the 12D framework. And this particular framework actually designs the effects of war into three aspects. And one is on the health, the second is on the determinants of the social health, and the third is determinants on the environmental health. So on the health per se, basically the effects can be mortality, death. It could be disabilities, that is from acute injuries of the war. It could be disorders and diseases. It could be dependency on alcohol and various illicit drugs. It could be deformities, mental as well as physical. On the social determinants of health, it could be disparities in socio-economic and health. For example, inequalities in income, displacement of population affected by the war.
But how do you address these challenges? That is the moot question. Yeah, Professor Mohan, yeah.
So I was forgot to tell that how it is being addressed. In fact, there are
The
articles
world is
written on
divided.
that.
On the one side,
So
you
the
have-
one thing that people do is, for example, airlines come forward.
Right.
Okay. So British Airways may come forward, or Emirates may come forward, or somebody will come forward and say, we will fly these medicines free to these regions because that is our contribution to that. Pharmaceutical agencies will come forward and say, people cannot at that time afford things. There is no money, there is nothing, war is there. So we will give it free. So from there. Then there are agencies. For example, the case of insulin, there's something called LFAC, Life for a Child.
Right,
It's based in Australia. They will be identifying every part of the world where there is a calamity. Whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a tsunami, whether it's a war, their only job is to ensure their interest is type 1 diabetes. They don't want children to die. Because just give the insulin, child will live. If you don't give insulin, they'll die. As simple as that. No other disease is so dramatic. Where you just stop this, they'll die, So they will ensure that insulin is given. And there are voluntary agencies, Medicines Sans Frontiers, Without Borders. These are all voluntary agencies, NGOs, Rotary will come in, Lions will come in. They'll all join hands together. And these are all people who are protected under a war. So if a Rotary and Greenpeace or water, all these kind of agencies join together and say we are helping people, and they will of course check whether any arms or ammunition is going. But no, even the craziest Hitler may not, stop somebody if you say I'm going to save some child there and giving, medicines to them, they will not. I think we have come, the World War II has taught us a lot of things. And so beyond that, there are certain, whatever may happen in the world, certain essential things have to go on. And that will go on even if the war is
Are you
there.
helpless?
Yeah, we are helpless, but there are solutions for that. And there are agencies working only for that situation. So otherwise there will be mass deaths, We have not heard of millions of people dying due to things. That is not happening. But somewhere along the line between the army ranks and so on, these help will be still going
Correct.
on.
But the trucks of medicines are loaded and kept at the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
It's not coming over there actually.
That's the best that you can do. And if you have mad people in the world, then these things happen.
I wish there are so many Dr. Mohan's clinics over there, so they could send without any problems actually. Now coming back to Mr. Sushant, who is the owner of the fastest growing pharmaceutical companies and specializing in cosmetology and dermatology, what are the regulatory hurdles you face in supplying to these countries in times of war, number one? Number two, what kind of request you get it from the government of India or you receive from the United Nations anywhere? And how do you address these problems as a responsible pharmaceutical company, as a part of your CSR? How do you address this actually? Please tell me your experience.
For having me on the show.
Right.
Let me take this into the three pieces that you have asked in question.
Right.
Number one, on the regulatory part. So if you look at during such a natural calamity we have in, most of the drugs which are used are already been approved by the regulatory bodies. So I would say around 90-95% of the drugs which will be used for treating these patients or the victims of the war, okay, you already have those drugs approved and already are in production, okay. So there is a free flow of all these drugs which are available. Now what happens is, as you rightly said, that you have all these medications with you, but ultimately it has to reach to the endpoint where it would be used in. Now say for example you have a truck which is standing at the Gaza border and you are not able to get it to the hospital where the patients have been treated. What's the use of having those medications? So typically what happens, and what I personally feel is, you need to have a right mindset and you need to have a right leadership who will ensure that even in such a case of calamity, the victims are not being penalized, neither do they suffer because of non-availability of the drug. So I personally feel that majority of the drugs which will be in use will already be there under production and you won't need those kind of regulatory approval. What you need is basically willpower to make this product available at the hospitals where it has to be used in. Second point was...
Second point is about how do you, what are the challenges you face in supplying those medicines actually?
Yeah, so that's what exactly I was talking about. The challenges would be like, the willingness of the government basically to...
What is your CSR budget for this?
So, see, see, we are a young
Company, I
growing
know that,
company. Yeah. So as of now, we have parked our CSR budget towards education. Okay. So we have been investing in education of children. So thankfully, I would say, as of now, India has not faced such kind of a natural calamity or a war where, we would have to pitch in, okay? But that's not the case. Our CSR is mostly towards
Okay, I will
education.
come back to Dr. Sreenath here, whose managing director is the president of Bulk Drug Manufacturers Association. Mr. Agrawal is not present here. So I would like to ask you, I would take back to 2020 when the COVID era started actually. We faced an acute shortage of APIs, pharma APIs, which are supplying to the pharma companies. So there were lots of issues coming out to, there was a pressure on you actually to give those drugs to the pharma company to address into this natural calamity which happened, once in a time situation actually.
Yeah.
How prepared were you, whether you were prepared or not, or you were prepared you didn't want to give them, or you thought whether if you give it free of cost, what was going on in your mind?
Yeah, thanks Dr. Satya for having me in this event. And during the COVID time, I'm proud to say being part of the pharmaceutical industry, API industry specifically for the past 35 years. During the COVID time especially, I'm little proud to say that I was part of the MSN laboratories team that time.
Good.
So just now I'm with the Nakoda Chemicals
I know,
as COO. So we were the, I can say definitely the frontline warriors or the doctors, medical doctors. We are the doctorates who were behind the screen in supporting the kind of medicines that are getting manufactured from the factories. We had the free kind of accessibility to the factories and for the manufacturing things, and we supported especially the Remdesivir case I'm trying to specifically talk about, which was very essential during the COVID time. Of course, the pricing was, the affordability was a different issue, but we gave this kind of Favipiravir, another drug which came into very quick, the availability for the masses. And not only I can connect a small point here, the regulatory hurdle, it was totally, became obsolete thing during the COVID time. We were asked to produce as good quantities as possible, several drugs like Favipiravir, Remdesivir kind of thing, in all the available facilities. I'm talking about specifically in Hyderabad case, and we did a good lot of effort in trying to make a quantum of the medications available, and subsequently which went into formulations overnight, and it was made available to the public masses in a very short time. So this is the kind of support the API industry and the formulation industry could also extend for the COVID requirement.
I would like to go back to Professor Dr. Mohan actually here, because you are the only one person who could answer this question. I also strongly feel that India might have a similar situation near future. We never know actually. Whether it is a natural calamity, whether it is a war-like situation, we don't know actually what is going to happen. Do you think, are you prepared for this, or have you made a blueprint, or there are no blueprint, or we are like a COVID-like situation, like it happens, we don't know, there are no oxygens available, there are no drugs available. So do you think that we should be prepared about it?
I think COVID has taught not only India but the whole world to manage such situations, and to India's credit and to the world's credit, how quickly beds were made available, how quickly oxygen concentrators were made available, how quickly the vaccine came out.
That was in phase 2. That was in phase 2, not in phase 1.
Phase 1, it takes in 1 week you cannot do things, whatever,
Yes.
if calamity hits you in 1 day you cannot
Right, yes.
But so I don't think the world has responded like this to any other calamity or to any other situation so fast. So I would say COVID actually gave us a lot of confidence that the country itself comes together. Let me just give you an example. Forget about medicines. Food. Okay. So there are houses where only the woman cooks, and the woman has got COVID and is in hospital, is in the house itself, or taken to hospital or something. How will that household eat? There's no food to eat. Now, people are scared to go there because you will get COVID.
It's true.
Now, so that's a situation. So, you know that the Gurudwaras did it, Satya Sai
Yes, sir.
organizations did it, thousands of people did it. Everybody was doing something and saying, okay, these flats we will take care. Now, how do we reach there?
Okay,
We
for
give
all
it-
of you who are not aware, let me tell you, Professor Dr. V. Mohan is actually a trustee of Sri Satya Sai Baba. They are actually at Kutupati actually.
And
Yes.
millions of people we fed every day because the organization has lakhs of people and each one took on 100 houses or 200 houses and so on, and millions of people, and all done free of cost, of course.
Sure.
Now, how do we reach those people? To reach the people, even the police don't, they've put barricades and you can't enter a street. So how do you reach medical supplies or whatever you want? So we give it to the police. The police then take it to each house. Sometimes we just take it and leave it at in the front of the house and then ring them and say, there is food outside, now you open the door. Because open the door, you're going to get infection.
True.
All these kind of things were done. Today, with technology, Satya, it's getting very easy. Drones are now supplying medicines to your
Yes.
house. Drones are can
Tata,
supply
yes,
food
yes.
to you. Bigger and bigger drones are coming which can even bring equipment to you.
True.
All these things are possible. So today, we didn't have that during COVID.
True.
In 2 years' time, the technology has learnt. AI has come in so much. I don't think it's going to be that big a problem. The only problem is going to be if mad leaders are there, mad people are there, you can't do anything with mad people. You know, they are mad. They have to be shot.
But
And,
why
you
we are
know,
not debating so much about this? It's a very significant topic to discuss about.
It is, and I think each country will find, I think there is still goodness in humanity, and that there are enough still good people in this world. And that is keeping the world going. Otherwise, the world would have collapsed long ago.
Okay, to the extension of your thought, no, I would talk to an extension of your thought. I want Dr. V. Mohan to ask you a question of my word. Do you want a pharmaceutical management institute, which, Dr. Suneel Deshpande is there, to have a separate syllabus on this? Do you advocate for this? Then he will answer
Absolutely. I
that.
think it's a great opportunity, isn't it? So, if an emergency situation like COVID or equivalent to COVID, they're saying things worse than COVID can come in the future. We never know. Wars are going on now, biological wars are going on, all kinds of things. The world is not going to be such an easy place to live in. The way we're looking at COVID can be just tip of the iceberg. So, in that kind of a situation, what technology can you use and how much of CSR or whatever else you can do to save humanity? And what are the basic things that you have to do? That may be something you can
Do you give a
I just
lecture
wanted
on?
to express
Yes, please go
one
ahead.
thought on your previous question. See, for example, now if you see, we did pretty well, in terms of the vaccination or the infrastructure. I'm referring even to the city of Mumbai. But there is one area which actually we need really a focus upon is with respect to the supply chains. And the supply chains for the pharmaceutical drugs. Now, if you see, if you just to have a corollary, we have a public distribution system in the food. But if you see the role of public sector, the government enterprises in the manufacturing of the drugs, it is still a long way to go. So the entire, even times of calamities like COVID, we had the private sector, rolling up their sleeves, in terms of making the drugs available. And I mean, there were so many different types of drugs which actually went into a short supply during a short period of time. So I see that as a matter of concern, which we need to really keep in mind, to prepare for the future calamities.
Right, I think we're running short of time. I'll just take one round each of you, starting with you, Dr. Sreenath, if you could answer me. Please give me 3 challenges that Indian healthcare system is facing. This is not about the panel discussion. What are the challenges we are facing on the Indian healthcare system? Very
Yeah.
brief and quick, yeah.
Yeah, as a single
And the
point.
final answer will come from Dr. V. Mohan.
Yes. Single point, yes, we are very good in making or reproducing the active pharmaceutical ingredients or the pharmaceutical drugs. But at the same time, I connect myself being part of the industry last 35 years, that we are polluting our entire Indian continent, all the 5 natural elements. So that I'm really very much worried, because the government per se or the individual companies per se are not trying to address that kind of polluting factors vis-a-vis the business making in course of this, transition. So I leave this question and the answer to the great public.
All right. So, Sushant, one question to you. How difficult for you to convince Dr. V. Mohan to prescribe your product, given that he doesn't have time, he doesn't meet any reps and anyone? How will you find time to meet him? Because if he doesn't prescribe, people will tell he is not prescribing, who else will do it?
Right. So, sir's specialty is diabetologist.
That is
and
okay, yeah.
We have a cosmetic portfolio. So, per se, there is a portfolio clash which is therein. But in general, for a pharmaceutical company to convince doctor like him would be the innovation. What kind of value are we adding to his patient's practice? For his practice to kind of, treat his patients more efficiently.
But there are so many other pharmaceutical companies that are doing good products actually.
So, thing is that, you need to have an innovative molecule, something which will value add. So, today I personally feel that, it's not an era of bringing any random molecule and making it available for doctors to prescribe. What we have to focus on is what are the challenges that the doctors are facing in? Are we able to provide them with an efficient solution which is of value? So if it is a part of his treatment regime, I certainly feel that there is no scope for the new molecule or the new product to be part of his prescription. And I'm sure if there is no value for him to be providing him to his patient, he is not going to prescribe any a product or a molecule.
All right, so going to Dr. Suneel Deshpande, a tough question for you. How do you see the future shape of healthcare is evolving? And what are the challenges that you face actually will come?
Yeah, I think a lot of speakers also spoke on this since morning. I think the first challenge which India needs to address is accessibility of healthcare. And when I say accessibility, it is with respect to infrastructure and the services. And of course, follows what comes second is availability. Because availability of drugs is totally different in a rural setup as compared to the urban setup, which is only 30% of what India's geographical, position is. And the third one, I would say, that's my personal opinion, is we need to buckle up, with respect to the regulatory speed as well as the procedures. Okay, one good, I would say, lining in the sky, in the dark skies was during the COVID time when the government actually tried to, shape up more readily. But then compared with the, say, developed Western worlds, probably we still have a long way to go with respect to new therapy areas. And that's one area which we need to also critically evaluate and ensure that to fulfill the first and the second one, the regulatory would play a major role in that.
Okay, I will ask finally to Professor Dr. B. Mohan. Often I get suggestion from others, even Dr. Suneel Deshpande will agree with me. We feel that pharma academia is being neglected. And pharma academia is not given due importance like the pharma companies or the others are given. Do you agree with me?
Partly correct. I think pharma definitely needs to be given more encouragement. But coming back to what are the challenges?
The road ahead for the future.
Yeah. So Suneel, I think, mentioned it, and before that, Dr. Anil Mathai also mentioned it. See, there is no dearth of fantastic drugs and which are getting better and better. Okay. But the problem is, mention is made about Ozempic and, Mounjaro and retatrutide, and these are drugs which are going to probably even replace bariatric surgery, no doubt about it. But the cost of that in the United States per month today is 2.5 lakhs of rupees per month. 25 lakhs of rupees for one drug, okay. Even if they bring it at 10% of that cost, which is going to be very difficult, how are people going to afford it in India? Which means only the creamy layer, the top 5% of people are going to afford it. The rest are not going to afford it.
Correct.
Okay. So how do we make these drugs affordable? If they are really game changing and if they're going to be life changing, how do we make it affordable to the common man? Are we going to give it free, or are we going to give it subsidized, or are we going to produce Indian generics which are much cheaper? Because the moment dapagliflozin came in generics, The SGLT2 went off. Until then, nobody could afford it. They'll say, good drug, but we can't use it, So that is number one. Number two, it also goes to the devices. Now, if you take a type 1 diabetic child, the artificial pancreas which has come now, the insulin pump, is absolutely mind-blowing. I've never seen anything like it in 50 years. Fit it and that's it. You can do whatever you want. It will find out your blood sugar, give you the correct insulin. You don't have to do anything. Simply put in some carb count. Even if you don't put it, it will still do it. It's game-changing. It's about 6 lakhs per initial cost and about 20,000 rupees for recurrent cost. Every child with type 1 diabetes needs it now. And there are 2 lakh children with that in India. Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to get it? So can Indian industry, if we can send a rocket to the moon and that to the other side of the moon which nobody else has sent, Indian engineers cannot make the small thing which can give insulin to people. Don't tell me engineers don't do it. So engineers are separate, doctors are separate, pharma is separate. Each one is living in their own silos. We're not coming together for a common cause. Indian engineers are fantastic. Indian doctors fantastic. Indian pharma is fantastic. Okay, and the government should encourage all three to come together to produce a product. If it is 6 lakhs, produce it at 60,000 or 50,000. And if the monthly cost is 20,000, make it 1,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees. Then every Indian child can do it. And then if there are 2 lakh, if there are 10 industrialists come together and say we'll each put in 10 crores, 20 crores, the whole of India's type 1 diabetes is solved. Like that, every disease which needs such costly, there are cancers which cost crores of rupees to treat, monoclonal antibody. Who's going to afford it? 10 people in India can afford it. Okay, so these are the things where we have to make in India, make it cheap and make it available. Keep the common man in mind always. Don't think of the rich 5% or 10%. You'll still get your profit. I'll also get my practice. I'll get my money. I'll get it. We're not solving the problem for India.
Right.
I think that is where we have to keep the country first and say that we are working towards a healthier India, healthier world. And when we do this in India, the whole world is ours. We gave vaccines to almost the whole world.
True.
The Indian vaccine you produced here was not only in India, 120 countries benefited from it. So whatever we do in India today, to the whole world there is a market. And there, fortune lies at the bottom of the pyramid. And that should be our aim. That is the only way we can reach the whole country. Producing some costly, fancy stuff, which even if it works, is not going to solve India's problem.
That's right. So keep the country first. Keep the country as well as the patient first. That is the motto which you have taken it from the panel discussion. Thank you, Professor Dr. Suneel Deshpande, for valuable insights and gracious presence here. Professor Dr. V. Mohan, Mr. Sushant, Raorane, and Dr. Sreenath for being on the show. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure talking with you and discussing these topics. With this, we come to the conclusion of this panel discussion. When we come back, we'll have a special talk from Professor Dr. Mukesh Batra after the lunch break. Thank you very much. Let's give him a huge round of applause then. Can you have the mementos, please? Special gift for this occasion. That was very difficult actually, yeah.